I think we as physical therapists are brainwashed into thinking that we need to work hard, we need to do all this extra paperwork, we need to accept the shitty payments and just fight for our value and try to prove our worth to the medical industry and not embrace new ways of doing this. We're speaking about talking to clients about embracing possibly getting a virtual check-in or a kiosk. People are like, we can't. I'm like, why can't you? Because we've never had it. Well, it's never been available like it is now, right? And open your eyes, let's math it out. Let's see what it looks like logistically. What does it look like? Does it fit into the whole patient experience? Because some people it won't, but some people are so just hung up and not even exploring the amazing technology that's out there. Bring in AI to reduce on your paperwork. People are fearful of that because they've never had to do it. The help is there to make our jobs easier and allow us to do better and make better client connection and establish a better relationship with our patients. Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Thomas Schreiber. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Strata PT. Strata PT combines your EMR and billing into one automated system to increase revenue and achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate for physical, occupational, and speech therapy clinics. On today's episode, Paul Singh, CEO of Strata PT, talks with Michael Silva, a PT business coach and consultant. Paul and Michael discuss how to create truly personalized, patient-centered care, building a stronger psychological connection to drive motivation, standing out through exceptional patient experiences, and achieving business success by focusing on customers. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and billing works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
We're going into 2025. You're talking to more and more practice owners in your consulting and coaching business. And in the pre-show, you were getting really fired up about a couple common mistakes. And I couldn't hit the record button fast enough, but I'm hoping I can kind of get you to speak, like open the bottle again and let it all out the same way. So just to recap, you were talking about some of the some of the check-in tools people are afraid to use. You were starting to riff on AI, issues. All right, so let's start over. Let's see if you can get that going again. What's
I'm gonna do
rubbing
my
you the
best.
wrong way about practice owners? What are these dumb mistakes these practice owners are making sometimes?
Yeah, I think we got on the riff pre-record just talking about, IT and technology and how it's in healthcare. And I think we as physical therapists are brainwashed into thinking that we need to work hard, we need to do all this extra paperwork, we need to accept the shitty payments and just fight for our value and try to prove our worth to the medical industry and not embrace new ways of doing this. So, we're speaking about talking to clients about embracing possibly getting a virtual check-in or a kiosk. People are like, we can't. I'm like, why can't you? Because we've never had it. Well, it's never been available like it is now, right? And open your eyes, let's math it out. Let's see what it looks like logistically. What does it look like? Does it fit into your the whole patient experience? Because some people it won't, but some people are so just hung up and not even exploring the amazing technology that's out there. Bring in AI to reduce on your paperwork. People are fearful of that because they've never had to do it. And the help is there to make our jobs easier and allow us to do better and make better client connection and establish a better relationship with our patients. But we're too freaking brainwashed. Like, no, let's just keep staying 2 hours late documenting your paperwork and miss your kid's bedtime because of it and work hard and think that you're only worth what the insurance is willing to pay you. And I think we got to have a big hard reset.
It's an interesting topic because there is a certain amount of hard work required to build a business from the ground up. I think Peter Thiel basically says it best when he says going from 0 to 1 is the most difficult part. But then if you make it to that point, then what's even more difficult, I would argue, is having the awareness to recognize that going from 1 to 10 or whatever your number is different. It's less hard work and it's more about systems and efficiencies and stuff like that. And I think it's easy for all of us to maybe armchair quarterback it, but we've all been there too. It's sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you're worried about the 87 things that could go wrong, when in fact you kind of need to be thinking about what is the one thing that has to go right to fix a certain problem that you have. Like in your case, the examples you use, like if check-ins are the problem, you either need to retrain the front desk and call Jerry Durham in and have him yell at somebody, or you need to embrace some technology, or come up with a third option. But, the lack of a decision also is a decision. And, people don't realize there's a cost to just.
And I think, and I think you would agree, a lack of a decision is a worse decision than the wrong decision. Like, you just need to decide, move forward, because you can alter, you can make things work. But just all those terms about not like analysis paralysis and all these other things, like people are just so hung up and they just don't. And then they put it off. They get caught up in the day to day. I got to treat my patients. I got to have a staff meeting, whatever it is. They just get caught up and they forget about working on improving the overall business. And you said something great. And I talked to a few clients right now who are really small. They're starting as single practitioners and they want to build. And when I'm looking at all their processes and procedures, their SOPs are not there, right? Because it's worked when you had one practitioner and you were the person doing your authorizations, and you were the person doing your scheduling, and you were the person looking at your AR. But like, to scale, and I keep telling them, like, I need you to imagine these processes when we have 10 therapists on your team, and then a lot of them are like, oh yeah, like that won't work, and just painting the picture. So I think getting them to see process wise, I'm having an easier time with clients getting, okay, let's redo the process. How can we make this scalable? Versus, hey, let's talk about a virtual assistant or a virtual front desk, or incorporate this technology. Then, like, you see the deer in headlights.
What I was just talking about a similar topic, this same topic, I should say, maybe an hour or two ago internally. And one of the things I was thinking about was this idea that, I wonder how differently practice owners would think about their business if they accepted the fact that they are in the business of patient acquisition and retention, and they just so happen to provide healthcare, which is, I think, opposite how 99% of practice owners actually think. They think, okay, I'm a healthcare provider. I employ healthcare providers. I create better patient outcomes. Like, that's all they think about. And now everything they do from a growth standpoint, an operations standpoint, a profitability standpoint is affected because of it. It's like, hey, if we actually put patients first. I mean, look, here's another way to think about this. So my wife sort of jokes that I can't enjoy anything, but like, okay, rationally, the chicken sandwich at McDonald's versus the chicken sandwich at Chick-fil-A are two very different things. We know that. And I think anybody would say they are not the same from a quality standpoint. These are subjective statements, but let's just say it is. But what we can objectively talk about is the fact that, like, that sandwich is $7 or something like that at Chick-fil-A, and it's probably $2 at McDonald's, right? How is it possible? Like, how is it possible that Chick-fil-A is able to convince somebody to spend $7? I don't think it's just the better quality, better ingredients. They don't even say that, I don't think, in any of their marketing material. It's about that feeling. Like, I think that Chick-fil-A's employees see themselves in the hospitality business, and they just so happen to make good chicken sandwiches,
Right. It's all
which
about
is
their
very
customer
different
experience.
than like Taco Bell or McDonald's or anything like that, right? Those are restaurants that happen to make food. They see themselves as a food provider.
Right, right, right. But think about the Chick-fil-A commercials. They bring on a customer from a store and they talk about the connection and the relationship they built with a customer. And it's usually some inspirational story, some endearing quality. They don't talk about their food, right, at all. So it's right. It's all about the experience they're getting, and people are finding it worth an extra $4 to go there than to maybe not be greeted with smiles and not be taken care of in the drive-through at McDonald's like they are at Chick-fil-A. The whole brand messaging. I think they've done an amazing job with their branding.
Well, and the business speaks for itself. There's a reason why it's so profitable, right? Like, we can kind of subjectively say, oh, it's better, but the fact is the results don't lie. And I think that maybe I'm taking you a little off topic here, but when I think about the healthcare industry as a whole, I know I'm an optimist. I know that. Like, you could punch me in the mouth, and I'd be like, oh, that's just Mike's love language. I don't know. I'm just an optimist. And the thing is that when I see healthcare, it's like I just see a completely under optimized business model, in terms of practice ownership, that clearly is making some money for a significant number of people. So, like, it's not wrong. It's not right for me to say, hey, it's broken. But man, if the industry can do as well as it is right now with very little attention to patient experience and patient benefits and all that, the optimist in me is like, man, how much more upside is there for not only the patients, but the business owners? Okay, this is a half baked thought, but I'll say it anyway and see what you think. I think the hard skills of practice ownership and physical therapy delivery, I think the hard skills are pretty well documented. Like you can go to school now and learn how to be a physical therapist. You can sign up for Mike Silva's coaching. You can look at YouTube videos. There's the hard skill. Like it's really difficult to, as a practice owner in 2025, it's really difficult to complain that you don't know where to go for help for the hard skills of practice ownership in 2025. Like you can't do that. What is not talked about very often, though, is the soft skills of practice ownership. Um, like if I walk into your practice, how am I greeted or not greeted? And using the Chick-fil-A example, right? Like, you know, and again, my wife jokes that I can't enjoy anything. I don't know if you've got a Chick-fil-A near you. I feel like everybody does, right? But like Chick-fil-A around lunchtime will typically have a person in the drive-through window that's walking out, past that electronic board. They'll usually have like 3 or 4 people out there, so that as the line gets longer, there's somebody there to take your order. Now, the basic person would think, "Oh, they're just trying to expedite the order taking." Well, that's not exactly what's happening. Like, it's not like by taking more orders, they can somehow magically make the drive-through run faster. It is not empirically moving the line faster. What they're doing is controlling the perception of the wait time. If I got my order taken, even though there might be 16, 20 cars in line, but I've given my order to somebody that walked up to my window, I feel that I was taken advantage or I was taken care of sooner. It's kind of like Disney does this too. When you and I were younger, like these kids today have no idea how good they have it. When you and I were younger, like we would probably stand in a line for 90 minutes, and then at the end, you got that like 3-minute ride at Disney or whatever, right? But if you look at Disney rides today, at least the newer rides in 2025, there's a part you might have like a 90-minute wait time. Like let's put aside lightning lanes for a minute. You might have a 90-minute wait time, but maybe the first 30 minutes is the boring part where you're kind of hanging out. But the next 60 minutes is part of the ride experience because the line will go inside and there might be videos of like let's say you're on a Star Wars ride. The actual Star Wars ride is like 90 seconds, but now they shift you from room to room to room and they're telling you a story, but they've made the waiting experience part of the experience, and it feels less like a wait and more like part of the ride. So it sounds kind of crazy, but I just can't help but wonder what would the modern day physical therapy practice look like in 2025 if it had a deep understanding of today's patients, if it had no legacy baggage of how we used to do things or how we always did things, right? And it had this insane desire to be the best in its geography. Like, I just wonder what that would look like. Like, it's almost like I'm half joking, half serious. What would it look like if a PT and an executive from Chick-fil-A got together? What would that practice look like?
Probably really good, in my opinion. And I think you're right. And going back to something like the whole, okay, you're still waiting the 90 minutes, but you don't perceive it as agonizing because you're going from a room to another section, you're being entertained, your attention is being grabbed. So the perceived value is high, even though it's the same 90 minutes, but they're not going to be as negative. So yeah, taking that whole, I mean, obviously you've known Jerry for a long time. You and I have known each other for a little bit. This is what we're trying to get across to people is like improve that experience. And it starts in the waiting room. It starts how you're greeted. Like we don't have drive-throughs, and none of the clinics that I've owned in the past or work with have long wait times because we try to reduce that because that's part of the whole patient experience. But if you happen to have a long wait time, how can you make that a better experience like the Star Wars ride at Disney World? It has to come in. I mean, there was a book I read. Oh shoot, what was it? It's a book on business, but the quote was, every business is theater, and every customer is your stage. I forget. I'm butchering the quote, guys. Apologize for butchering that quote, but I'll get it right and I'll send it to you. But and like right now, where we are, we have to compete on the experience. We can all deliver physical therapy. And even that is not physical therapy in one practice is not the same as the other. So the word physical therapy, I even think the word physical therapy is freaking tainted, because people have shitty experiences in physical therapy. They've had long wait times, no personalized care, no connection, like personalized attention, and so they have a negative connotation to it. I know people who don't want to put the word physical therapy on their business name because of that. But I know people who've tried and like, well, people don't know what we do, so I had to put the word physical therapy in there, and it's changing our perception of, this is the whole way we've always done it. This is just the way it is. We're the unwanted stepchild of the healthcare industry. Poor us. It's the insurance company's fault. It's venture capital's fault. It's corporations' fault. They're pointing fingers at everyone. Like, we need a mind shift to say, no, we can take control of our business. We can make it an unbelievable experience. And you're right, you can make money in physical therapy. And guess what, practitioners? It's not a bad thing to make money. Like, you can make money while you're providing this unbelievable experience and getting good outcomes.
I have this crazy idea that I just can't get out of my head, but so let me set this up. So when I first started investing in early stage startups, in 2008, 2009, so now I've invested in like 3,300 of these companies. One of the things I was thinking a lot about at the time, and just bear with me for a second because I'm going to bring it back to physical therapy. One of the things I was thinking about at the time was that, like, I have this theory that in 2008, uh, 50 grand was the equivalent of $5 million in 1995. And what I mean by that is that for you to start a business in 1995, you had to have a rich friend, a rich uncle, aunt, whatever. Because if you wanted to do anything interesting in the technology space, it cost the equivalent of like $5 million to get it off the ground. Um, Fast forward to like 2008, you could accept a credit card almost overnight with, authorize.net or blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just a lot of ways you could get it going. And so I that was the unique sort of model I used, was like I was just spraying $50,000 checks around to companies saying like, "Hey, let's see if you can get it off the ground," which sounds ridiculous, but if you're betting on 200, founders around the country every year, the numbers kind of work themselves out. And so did that for about a year or two, and then realized like, gosh, these teams are really good, but what they were lacking was a modern day business school, because like there are great business schools at Wharton and Babson and all, pick your university. They got a good business school, I'm sure, but they're designed for industries where you might need more than $1 million to get started. You obviously would need an MBA or something like that in place if you're going to deploy large amounts of money like that. But when you're talking about 10, 20, 50 grand, 100 grand, these MBAs, it's not that they weren't useful. It's just that, like, to go from 0 to 1 is less like a business case study and more like a brute force thing. And so we built this, we called it an accelerator program. Today, this is very common, but at my venture firm, we still run it today, but my venture firm, we call it the 500 Accelerator. The idea was it was a 12-week modern day business school. And each week was essentially like a hands-on course on data design, like financial, like it's basically everything you needed to get to your first $1 million in revenue within the first 12 weeks. And it worked in tech-enabled industries. So it still runs today, very useful, and I've been wondering, and the idea that I can't get out of my head is like, what would it look like to create that for healthcare? Because like healthcare, as you know, and you can probably speak to this better than anybody else, one of the constraints with the healthcare industry is that the practice needs to be at least one of the owners needs to be a PT, right? And I know why they do that, right? You don't want VCs like me involved. That's not a good idea. I admit, I agree with that, by the way. That's probably a smart thing. But it's like, what if you could train these practice owners in the skills they never were taught in school around modern day marketing, modern day finance, modern day customer acquisition and retention? All of a sudden, I think you would see quite a bit more profitability throughout the industry. So, for example, I know it's kind of unsexy and maybe taboo to talk about, but let's use e-commerce as an example. Whether you use Amazon or you use like Lululemon, pick any e-commerce company that you've bought from in the past. They don't see you as Mike Silva, the guy that bought a pair of running pants from Lululemon. What they see is an athlete, and the first sale is the entry point into a lifetime revenue stream for Mike Silva. In other words, they don't say, "Oh, this guy Mike just bought a pair of running pants. Good for him. High five, marketing team. Great job with your Google ads." What they say is like, "Okay, we now know that Mike bought these pants. And we can now assume that he's a sprinter versus a long distance runner versus a weightlifter. If you look very carefully at the purchase checkout flow, they're figuring out what you are. And then every subsequent email that you get is tied to that lifestyle, because the words we use in the e-commerce industry is we use the words CAC and LTV. What is the cost of acquisition of a customer, CAC? And what's the lifetime value, the LTV of that customer? So Mike Silva might have cost, I'll just use one of my other businesses as an example. I know it costs me about $33 to acquire a customer, plus or minus a little bit. It just costs me about $33 to acquire a customer. I know the lifetime value of that customer is worth probably $4,000 to $5,000 over the course of 3 years. So think about that. And you know this, but just for anybody listening, think about that. Like, that is the proverbial tree of money. If you could spend $33 and know that you were going to get $4,000 to $5,000 from that customer, now you have to provide value to do that. But if you knew that you could do that, would you ever stop? Absolutely not. You would just pile drive into that. And so we start to think about, like, and this is where my wife jokes I can't enjoy anything. This is where it's like, and I know it's taboo, but when a patient walks into the practice and, let's say there is an episode or an issue or, that requires, let's say, 6 visits, just for napkin math, that patient is worth $600. And, we should be pulling out every stop around the psychology of that patient and provide value to that patient and make sure they understand everything they not only stand to gain, but the things they might even stand to lose if they don't finish that plan of care. And this is where we get into what I call the soft skills of patient care. And let me say this, and then let me see where you want to go with this. So I like to run marathons. I kind of joke that it's cheaper than therapy. So I try to run 4 marathons a year, which statistically means I do at least 2 dumb things a year that require me to go see a PT. And the thing I love about it is that this PT that I see here, he's about 30 minutes away from my house. Definitely not close. I passed like 20 different locations of other practices to go get this guy. But why do I pick him? Because on paper, they all have the same degree. Whether they went to like PT school here, they all on paper all have the same degree. The reason I like that guy is because I'll just give you an example. The other day I went in there. And he was like, all right, and we're direct access, right? So I can just go directly in, and then, normally he's got me fixed before I have to go get the referral anyway. So he goes, all right, man, what's up? And I told him what was going on with my knee or whatever. And he's like, all right, cool. What was your latest, what was your latest time? I was like, oh yeah, I think it was like a 318 or whatever. He's like, okay, first off, if you don't complete this plan of care I'm going to give you, you will not run that 318 again. He's speaking to me psychologically, right? He knows exactly what will scare me. He goes, first of all, if you do not finish this plan of care, you will not run that 318. By the way, if you do finish this plan of care, then here's the other thing. We're going to do one more gait analysis. By the way, Aetna won't cover that. You are going to pay for it. But after that, after we fix you up, you're going to do a gait analysis, and I'm going to put a plan together to get you to 315. Does that work?
Yes,
I don't miss a meeting with that guy.
Right.
Right. And fast forward, I'm 43 now, but let's say, 30 years from now, I'm still around and my kids have kids. I bet that same guy, if he's still practicing, he's the kind of guy that would say, hey, are you grunting? What do you hate about picking up your kids? I'd be like, oh, I don't want to be that granddad that grunts. And he'd probably build me a plan because he's thinking about the psychology. All the healthcare nerds are like, let's give better patient outcomes. But none of them are actually asking themselves, what does a better outcome really mean? It's never, I would say it's very rarely the medical outcome. Like, I'm not thinking about the medical outcome. I'm thinking about like the personal outcome. The medical outcome, it has to happen, right? And I think this is the thing that I love about what you and Jerry are talking about. And I think this is why I think it's such an important topic, because if we could get more practice owners to at least start thinking this way, I think that the patients would benefit and these practices would be way more profitable.
Yeah, that's right. You had so many golden nuggets there, and I've already forgot some of them. But for that therapist to kind of hit home with you, he had to know you and what was important to you and your goals, right? And arguably, it might take a couple minutes, a couple visits before you really know someone, but hopefully through the intake process, when you walked in the door the first time, he knew you were a runner. He knew a little bit about you so he could have a conversation and talk your talk. But he was able to look at you and say, you're not going to do a 318. You need to finish this plan of care. And he knows that you're a competitive guy. He's like, I'm going to get you to 315. We just have to do the gain analysis, right? So he knows what's valuable to you, because you didn't show up to his office because you wanted physical therapy. You show up to his office because you can't friggin' run. And it's important to you because you don't, that's your therapy, and you want a PR, and you want to beat your, you want to be able to do your 4 marathons a year. So he saw that, and he was able to talk to you in a way to show the value of what he could do for you, not value for the insurance company. And I mean, I guarantee he didn't impress you with some weird diagnosis and give you a big name, and you were like, "Ooh, I have patellofemoral pain syndrome. You're so smart. Thank you for telling me that." Right? That probably never even came up. And you're right. And it's the soft skills. It's the art behind this. The science is easy, and you can get out of grad school and you'll learn how to not kill a patient, and you'll learn how to improve the healing qualities of the human body a little bit. But even new grads don't know shit. Pardon my French. But to especially like with me, because I had a niche practice, so it took me years to develop the skills and the um, the acumen that I had in the running world. And because of that, I was able to connect with people like you. If you came in, I could talk to talk. I would know how much running meant to you. I would know that running 17 miles a week is not a lot of miles for a marathon runner. You go to a general PT practice and you say you run 17 miles, and some overweight physical therapist is going to say, "Wow, that's a lot. You should run less." Because you're not in the right place. And this, I think we might have talked about this pre-record. Riches are in the niches, and there was some other things we talked about, right? But it's true. Like, people came to us, and the same thing. They bypassed dozens of clinics because we talked the talk, we walked the walk, we knew what was important to them, and we had services, cash-based, insurance-based products. We had everything they needed to get them to their goals, and we provided the good experience, kind of like what we talked about before. So all comes around, but none of that would happen. It wouldn't all come together without that art behind of what we're doing. And those are the soft skills.
Right.
Connecting, looking at you in the eye, not worrying about me hammering away on my paperwork as I'm listening to your story about not being able to run and why it's important to you, being able to connect. And again, it goes down to, they don't teach, I mean, they touch on communication in grad school, I think, but from what the research I've done in some of the curriculums, they're not doing that. And some of it comes from experience as well. And I think some of it's a skill. Like, there are some people who are not meant to really service other humans. I
Yeah.
hate to say this,
Yeah, no,
right?
it's fair. That's true. It's true.
Right. And there's some that are amazing. When you leave talking to someone and you feel better about yourself, they didn't really talk, but you just like, they were able to communicate in a way that was effective for the two of you. Like, you need that skill. You can work on it. Some people have it naturally. I don't think I had it naturally. Maybe I still don't have it. I don't know. I'm trying my best.
Well, it's and this topic is the thing that I feel that, like, even when I'm just sitting in the middle of something else and zoning out, my mind floats back to this topic because I don't quite know how to articulate it yet, but I have a feeling that it is the most important topic over the next 3, 4, 5 years in this industry. And that is that, like, if we look at most other industries, what we can what we can't ignore is there is a significant difference between good companies and great companies. In other words, if you pick any industry you want, most industries are defined by the power law, not the normal distribution, but the power law, meaning the top 3 companies in any given industry tend to take like 80% of the revenues and the profits. And then all the other companies on that power law distribution are just fighting for the scraps. Well, what is the difference between those top 3 in every industry versus everybody else? What fundamentally makes the difference between the companies that have more profit that they know what to do with versus the companies that are just fighting for the scraps? It has to do with this reality that the best companies have brute forced their way for a certain amount of time to make something people want. They figured out what it is that people want. And then they have this deep understanding of customer psychology, and they really double down on it. So, using the Chick-fil-A example, the reason why Chick-fil-A dominates the fast food market, and they set their own prices and people are happy to pay way more, is because, like, there's a feeling that comes with being at Chick-fil-A, right? We can rationalize and say, "Oh, that's not smart. There's makes more economic sense to not, have fast food." You can do that all day if you want. But at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. Apple's got more money in their treasury than most countries in the EU. We could argue all day about, like, whether or not they're a good company or a bad company, but in the context of business, they understand why their customers buy product. You probably remember this. I remember, for the kids listening, you guys think about Best Buy, but I remember Circuit City was around. And if you were lucky enough to buy a computer, what did you do? You walked in there and there'd be like a little like tag with the price and the features. And you basically, even if you didn't know anything about computers, you bought the most expensive thing you could afford with and that had the longest feature list. You don't know what the hell those features mean, but you were just like, okay, I can afford this much money. Which one of the things has the most things on the list? I'll buy that one. Whereas Apple, you go into an Apple store, very different. It's kind of like, do you want the big one or the small one? Do you want the black one or the pink one? You know, and you're going to pay 3x more, right? It's just a different, it's a different thing. Like, why do people buy Apple? Well, it just works. It just works. I can cut and paste something on my desktop, pick up my phone and hit paste, and it works. Like, you know, um,
I'm Paul. On that note, I'm addicted to Apple. You know, I've I bought stock in Apple because I've used it so much and I believe in it. I spend more money on Apple products than a lot of my friends do with PCs and Samsung Galaxies. Right? I tried to get off of Apple probably about 10 years ago, and I was miserable because of the ease, the connection, the experience, everything. I like going to the Genius Bar. They're really nice when I go there, and they really want to help, and they make it a really good experience. I love unpacking my new iPhone. I love unpacking my new MacBook. I love the way they all connect seamlessly. I love the limited decisions. It's like, true, do you want the really big one? Or do you want this one?
yeah.
Do you want the 15 inch or the 13?
You know what's crazy to me, and I don't know if this is I don't know if this will resonate with you because I don't know what it's like in New York where you're at, but you're in New York, right? Um, Rhode Island, yeah. So like I don't know if it's the same there, but so for example, here in Virginia, our healthcare systems are primarily owned by Inova, it's like large health system. So that's where your primary care and all that's going to be done. The hospitals are owned by Inova, all that stuff. Um, so here's the thing. I think the least worst patient experience in 2025 in Northern Virginia right now is urgent care centers. A week ago, I just felt horrible. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the urgent care, whatever, right? And there's like 5 different urgent care centers or whatever around here. So here's the thing: on any of them, it's kind of like Instacart. On all of them have an app. I just open the app and I'm like, okay, which one of them has the best? This was like 9:30 in the morning last Wednesday. I'm like, okay, I'm hurting. I got to see somebody. I'm opening up these apps, so it's fast. I'm used to that in 2025. Let me just open an app, right? Okay, I look around. I'm like, oh, one of them's got an appointment at 10:07. That's 47 minutes from when I opened this. I'm sorry, 37 minutes from when I opened this thing. So I'm like, oh, damn, that's good. I can do that. So I asked my wife. I'm like, hey, you got the kids if I roll? This is New Year's Day, by the way. So I'm like, she's like, yeah, I got them. So like, I hit the button, and it's like Instacart. It's like, all right, tell us when you're on the way. Like 10:07's yours, but tell us when you're on the way. So you hit the button, and then a little alert pops up. It's like, hey, do you authorize so and so urgent care to have access to your geolocation? I'm like, all right, whatever. And as I got closer and closer to this facility right here down the street, um, as I walked in, the young lady behind the desk was like, "Oh, you must be Paul." She knew because they embrace technology. She knew it was me, and she goes, okay, yeah, you were here a couple weeks ago. Has anything changed?" I was like, "No." She's like, "All right, go to room 3, and I'll send you a text of any additional forms I need. You might want to take a picture of your like." It was 2025. So I walk in, that's 10:05, 10:07, I'm in the room, 10:17 or something like that. Provider walks in, I'm out the door at 10:40 with a prescription for
Dude, that's
Tamiflu.
unheard of. That is unheard of.
That's urgent care today. And I'm like, this is like how Instacart does it. It's like when I pick up my kids from school in the afternoons, like there's like a million grocery stores and Instacart has made it so that I can just say, hey, I don't want to unload 4 kids from the car. Which one of you has my groceries? Hit the button. I'm on my way. White Suburban shows up. Pop the rear. They put it in. It's like boom, boom, boom. And it's easy for some cynical practice owner to be like, yeah, it's always been done this way, Paul. You can't just change, right? But that is the difference, I think, between entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. I think wantrepreneurs spend all their time trying to find 87 ways things could go wrong, 87 reasons why you shouldn't do something. And it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. I tell these people, it's like, why don't you just like, you sound like you would have more fun just being an employee at some other healthcare organization. Just please put yourself out of the misery and go do something about it. But the difference between a entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, I think, is the entrepreneur is naive enough to spend most of their time thinking about what is the one thing that has to go right. Because, like, that guy, he probably doesn't think about it this way, but that PT that I see, I alone cannot keep his practice alive. Like, it's not like he's like, oh, let me just talk to Paul a certain way and then twice a year he'll come back to me. I think the way he thinks about it is like the e-commerce guys. He says to himself, okay, each time a patient like Paul has an issue, that's probably worth $600 across 6 visits. Okay, how do I make sure that each patient like Paul has a wonderful experience, gets an outcome that is aligned with exactly what he wants in his life? And if we could do that and maybe acquire 300 Pauls within, the zip code that he's in, that's a pretty profitable practice, you know? And that doesn't even take into account the cash I'm spending. That's just the insurance reimbursements.
Right, right. And you mentioned like the lifetime value of a client. So you're saying they are like 600. I argue that it's actually more. If you have and can track your referrals. So in again, I just go back to the business I own because that's what I spent 20 years doing, right? We had, I think, depending on the year, between 2 and 3 referrals for every client, every happy client we had. And we had a lot of happy clients. So if each client was worth 1,000 and they're referring 2 people, that client's worth 3,000 in my eyes, right? And now we got their referral coming in and they're going to refer 2 others. So I looked at it even more. And like you said, with the PT you're seeing, he has to provide that experience. He has to get the outcomes. He has to make it a worthwhile event, not just for you, but for everyone that walks in the door. And tell me if I'm wrong, but if you've got one of your running buddies who has a knee issue, you're probably going to give him this guy's name because you've had good experience with him, right?
That's the mistake I make for trying to blow my nose. Um, Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely, I would do that. When you started talking about that, by the way, one of the things I thought it'd be worth sharing is this idea that, like, when you start to think about cost of acquisition versus lifetime value, one of the things we talk about a lot in the venture capital community, the tech-enabled world, which I think also applies, it should apply here to healthcare, but people don't talk this way very much, is this idea that if you know what your expected value could be from a customer, and you kind of knew what your cost of acquisition was, you should be willing to pay up to 3x to get there. So let me explain with some examples. Let's use me as an example. I know I'm going to probably statistically have 2 episodes, or whatever word you guys want to use, 2 episodes per year related to running injuries. It's just statistics, right? It's going to happen when you put in this many miles, right? All things being equal, just for the sake of napkin math, let's say that each episode of care requires 6 visits. And with Aetna, let's just for just napkin math, let's assume it's $100 per visit. Statistically, what that works out to be is that I'm worth $1,200 minimum to whoever takes care of me every year per year. And I'm doing this every year, right? So in theory, you treat me right, I'm with you for the next 20, 30 years of my life. So, okay, if that's the case, if somebody like me is worth $1,200 a year, let's just say you're a new practice and you're like, but Paul, how do I figure this out? What I would say is, like, the rule of thumb is you obviously are going to have more data over time, but you don't have time yet. So rule of thumb is just use 3 years as the initial stake. If you provide a good value to me as a patient, then assume I'm going to be a customer for 3 years. So $1,200 a year times 3, $3,600. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. The next question should be, how much should I be willing to pay or to invest in, whether it's referral sources or direct acquisition of me? Really what it comes down to is it should be uh, like the magic number is, feel free to test up to a third of the first year's revenue. Use up to a third of the first year's revenue to acquire that customer. In other words, if the first year revenue with me it might be $1,200, you should be willing to spend up to $400 to try to acquire me. Because if you provide a good service, you will get that money back within the first episode of care, right? Like, that first episode, like the $600, you will have spent up to $400 to acquire me. $200 left. Now, obviously, you got to pay for other things. I get that, right? But the point is, like, if you start to think about this and you layer it on to your daily patient acquisition sort of thinking, the numbers skyrocket very, very quickly, very, very quickly. Um, so
But they don't teach that in grad schools.
no,
And that's not looked at that way.
That's right. Nobody's thinking that way. That's why I kind of think about this idea of, like, what would the modern day business school look like for practices? And I think you and I have traded emails. Even you were kind enough to be like, "Hey, dude, if you do this, like, I want to be in it." Um, uh, and I think it's like it's one of those things where it's like, okay, what I don't know what it looks like yet, but I just can't shake the idea, because it's kind of like every time I start to, like, my thoughts wander back to this, I'm like, oh man, like, these practice owners know how to provide great outcomes. They know how to like run a basic business at basic profitability. This is one of those industries that's crazy to me though, because like your customers don't really age out that often. And if you provide a good service, they're going to kind of come back to you. Like it's wild. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I know this sounds horrible to say, but in the venture capital industry, one of the things we ask ourselves is like, whenever you make an investment in something, it's like, are we investing in a vitamin or a painkiller? And the vast majority of very successful companies that come from the venture capital community, I hate to say it, they're vitamins. They're not painkillers. Like when you think about big companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter, eBay, whatever, yeah, some analysts could make the case that, gosh, Facebook allows for people, da, da, da. But the reality is these are vitamins. I mean, these are like dopamine things. People are scrolling through the Facebook feeds or whatever, right? But like healthcare is literally a painkiller. Like people, at the end of the day, it's one of the only things they will not skimp on is making sure that they are as healthy as they can be and things like that. So it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm just a weird optimistic tech guy or whatever, but it's like somebody, when I was at PPS with you a couple months ago, there was some guy from some alarm, so I probably don't want to embarrass him, but there was a guy from a large publicly traded company that everybody knows that was riding the escalator down with me. And he goes, what, he's like, what is somebody like you doing here? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that. And he goes, no. And so it was that long escalator down to the trade show floor. That escalator was so long. And I was like, do you want the street answer or the real answer? And he was like, I didn't know they were different. What is it? And I said, well, the street answer is like, oh no, he goes, okay, what are they? And I said, well, the real answer or the business answer or whatever you want to call it is like better patient outcomes and help practice owners make more money. And he goes, okay, so how's that different than the street answer? I was like, your industry, this industry, I was like, all these people in this showroom floor, everybody inside that showroom floor is convinced that they are operating in the least profitable industry that has ever existed in humankind. And all I see is something even more like, and coming from like the venture world, it's like if we were able to, as an industry, create trillions of dollars of value, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of new jobs, create all this wealth for a lot of people in this country and all over the world. What could you do with healthcare? Like, I don't know. I'm not trying to be your Tony Robbins or something like that. But the point is, like, I just see a lot
Yeah,
of opportunity. And back to your point at the beginning of the show, like, people are afraid of embracing either AI or new technologies or whatever. To that, I would say, like, it's perfectly acceptable to, maybe stall a little bit while you're trying to, assess options. But really, what hurts companies is when they then let that go for too long and they forget that the lack of a decision is a decision in of itself. And there's only a certain amount of time that you're allowed to kind of cry foul. Like in other words, if you have a problem in your business and you've done nothing to fix it within 30 days, okay, I'll give you a little bit of leeway. But if I hear you say the same thing over and over on day 33, day 35, now it's on you. And I think that's the thing for these
exactly.
practice owners. Like somebody's got
So
to like kind of shake them a little bit.
yeah, I saw the term and I actually used it in a post a while back. What you're not changing, you're choosing. And it's the same, like if you hear people bitch about the same thing or complain about the same thing and they're not taking action to change it, then they're just choosing to be miserable or to deal with that. Right. Another thing I want to go back to, you're talking about all this, and I think it also goes to we as clinicians, one, need to know how valuable we are and need to know that, like the word selling, like learning ways to communicate better with your patient. I've had clinicians say, oh, we're just using mind tricks to make people think they need us, or it's these sales ploys. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're providing a huge value. We need to get these people to have buy-in so they can improve their lives, improve their health, be able to pick up their grandkids, walk. Like some of these people need a little extra motivation because let's face it, like the average American is not the healthiest person in the world, right? So they need a little extra motivation from us. That's what we're here for. And I'm going to steal a quote from Michelle Colley from High Bar. She said this a few times, like, hey guys, we're not selling cigarettes. Like we're helping people. We're selling a service that is going to improve the lives of people. Like we need to know how important that is. And if we can do that, then it allows us to shine and actually help them. but we need to get them in. Yeah, learn some communication skills, learn the psychology of a customer, learn the psychology of chronic pain, learn all these things. You can have better conversations, make a meaningful connection, and have a client for life, and see the referrals come in and the value go up, blah, blah, blah.
It's interesting when you hear, and I want to be respectful of your time here, but I would just say, like, you know, uh, whenever I hear practice owners say stuff like that, where they're like, "Oh, you're just," like what you just said there, like, "Oh, that's salesy. That's this. That's the other." It takes almost every piece of my being to just hold myself back and ask these people, like, what horse did you ride in on that makes you think that healthcare is any different than any other industry that you've dealt with in your life? Like when you walk into CarMax, they don't just shove the next available car on you and say, "Hey, you're welcome. Get out." No, they walk you through a process of, "Hey, what kind of car are you looking for?" Now, sometimes people come in and say, "I want exactly that car and only that car." Okay, we'll take care of that. But sometimes they walk in and they say, "Man, I got 4 kids. I don't know which cars will fit 4 car seats." And they'll say, "Okay, cool. You got them in your car. Let's bring them out and let's just start go putting them in different cars and see what works." Like, that's consultative. Uh, Pick any other industry. You walk into the Apple store, they don't say, "Would you like a white iPhone or a black iPhone?" I mean, if you walked in and said, "I want a black iPhone," they would sell it to you. But if you walked in and said, um, "I have 2 monitors on my desk and I want the smallest laptop I can buy," they're gonna walk you through that and then sell to you. Is that salesy? No, absolutely not. We would say they are helping us find what we want, but somehow in
Right?
healthcare,
It's
you're the bad
salesy.
guy. I'm the bad guy
And
for, like,
I
calling people
know.
out, you know?
I know. And God forbid we actually ask them to pay out of pocket for something. I tell you, I don't know many private practices that can have healthy margins without self-pay revenue coming in anymore, right? Like, but people are still, and I've found it in my practice and with some of these people I'm working with, the clinicians have a hard time selling a product. I'm like, do you believe in the product? Is it going to help the person? Is it going to help them meet their goals? Are they going to be able to run healthier without hurting their knee if they bought a massage gun and used it prior to their warm-ups? Yes, it will. Why would you not offer that? We have them here. They don't have to go onto Amazon. They don't have to go online and put the credit card in. We've got their credit card on file right here. They can walk out today with a tool that's going to make them better.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not just selling a product, you're offering them solutions to their problem. But getting them to see, like, I can't sell, that's too expensive. You can't decide what's too expensive. That's on the individual. Someone who's well off would not think twice about spending $1,000 on something that's going to improve their life, right? Someone who's doesn't have those means, $100 might be a lot. We get that, but that's why you got to know your patient, but also let them decide on what they think is affordable or not. They'll tell us.
That's
Offer it
exactly
to them.
right. Yeah, that's
Yeah, you
exactly
just got to
right.
offer it to them.
I love it, man.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata PT combines your EMR and billing into one automated system to increase revenue and achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate for physical, occupational, and speech therapy clinics. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and billing services work, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.